We are going to talk tonight about corruption, the UN Coalition Against Corruption, and the meeting we just had in Doha, Qatar. And I'm going to let Corinna talk a little bit more about what that is. And then I wanted us to talk about why that meeting was important for those of us in the Americas. I'll leave the S on that. So, because I know a lot of our followers aren't just in the United States, they're in Canada and Central and South America. So we get people, and we've been working quite a bit across borders, and some of these cases that come up are really from all over the world. Whistleblowers of America has provided peer support to people in, I guess, 34 countries at this point. And we have had requests for all kinds of support and assistance from people as they try to understand whistleblowing, corruption, retaliation, mental health. So we do our best to provide some resources and tools for how to cope with what they've experienced as a result of reporting corruption. So I think I'm going to get started with that. Again, my last reminder to introduce yourselves in the chat if you want to be connected, and just sort of say hello, maybe who you are, where you are, is always kind of helpful for everybody to see who's participating. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with what is UNCAC. And for that, I'm going to turn my attention to Corinna, and if I'm saying your last name wrong, I apologize, Gilfillan, and ask Corinna to just kind of tell us a little bit about herself, and then we can talk more about the UNCAC as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie, and great to be here today with all of you to join this roundtable discussion, and great to see you, Jackie, after seeing you in Doha. Yeah, so just a little bit about myself and our organization. So my name is Corinna Gilfillan. I'm a senior analyst with the UNCAC Coalition. We now have a new name. It's the Global Civil Society Coalition for the UNCAC. And just a little bit about our organization. We are a global network of close to 400 civil society organizations in about 120 countries across the globe. So we have a huge network of groups that are in some way focused on anti-corruption. Many of our groups are focusing on transparency, enhancing transparency, accountability, civil society participation, whistleblower protection, various aspects of that are related to addressing corruption. And we really work at the global as well as regional and national levels. My background is I actually, before coming to our coalition, I was working a lot on natural resource corruption. So I was working on issues like blood diamonds, trying to get better governance in the oil, gas, and mining sector. So I did a lot of work, both investigative research work as well as advocacy on that issue. So when I came to the coalition, it was kind of a natural extension, but it's a really, truly global coalition, and we've got regional networks as well as working groups, including the working group today that's co-sponsoring this, the protection of whistleblowers and other reporting persons. And that's where we really bring together groups working on these issues from all across the globe to try to advance things globally as well as at the national level. Oh, I'm not sure I could hear you.
Muted myself. I'm always the worst offender. So Samantha Feinstein from the Government Accountability Project has been, and GAP itself has been, a partner of ours since probably the beginning of Whistleblowers of America. Had it not been maybe for some of their encouragement and support, I might have quit a long time ago. So I'm always grateful to GAP and all the support they give us. So Samantha, if you want to introduce yourself and just a little bit about what you do.
Thanks, Jackie, and thanks for not giving up. just briefly introduce myself. I'm Samantha Feinstein, and I'm the International Director, and I'm a staff attorney at Government Accountability Project, and we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to protecting whistleblowers based in Washington, D.C. We started in 1977 out of the Institute for Policy Studies and became fully independent in 1984. And we work with a large variety of whistleblowers from all sorts of sectors, and including whistleblowers from international organizations. We do corruption investigations and provide free resources for whistleblowers, journalists supporting whistleblowers, organizations supporting whistleblowers, and so on, which are all available on our website. In addition, I am also the co-chair of the Global Civil Society Coalition for the UNCAC. I'm just going to start calling that the coalition from here on out. That's a mouthful. We understand. So I'm the chair of their Whistleblowing Working Group. And we'll put in the chat information if any of you are interested in joining the working group, but that is sort of my role with the coalition, and it is through the coalition that I have been engaging with the UN Convention Against Corruption fora, which I know we're going to get into much more soon. So I'll maybe leave it at that.
Okay, so let's move into then exactly what is the UN Coalition Against Corruption. A little bit maybe about the history of the organization, and then the Convention of State Parties. We just had our 11th meeting. What's the history of that? And then we can talk maybe more about the importance of it.
Okay, thank you. So for the coalition, it's actually our 20th anniversary this year, so that's exciting. We're based. The secretariat, or the hub of the coalition, is based in Vienna, Austria. I am not, unfortunately, based in Vienna, Austria. I am based. I'm based in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. But so we've been around for 20 years. And, really, we were organized or founded, as I understand it, to basically make sure that this convention, the UN Convention Against Corruption, actually achieved its goals. So we are really focused on promoting the ratification. Now we've got 192 states that are states that are members, right, of the UNCAC. So it's near universal participation, but we were focused on ratification at the beginning, early days, but now really focused on promoting effective implementation of the UNCAC and strengthening, trying to strengthen the convention as well. So we work on all those fronts on key anti-corruption topics, and we really also focus on promoting civil society participation in UNCAC fora, but also in anti-corruption efforts and transparency efforts at the national level, regional level, and global levels through our working groups and through our regional networks. So that's kind of a history of our organization. And with the UN Convention Against Corruption, so that was actually adopted in 2003. So our coalition formed a couple of years after, formally formed after a couple of years after that. But that convention was adopted in 2003 and then became in force a couple of years later in 2005. And so actually, when the United States, because there's presidents that host the COS, the Conference of States Parties, that's the biannual conference where all the states come together of the UNCAC, which we just had in Doha. But actually, a couple of years ago in 2023, the United States hosted the Conference of States Parties. They were the president of the conference of the UNCAC. That was the 20th anniversary of the UNCAC. So it's been around, for a while now. And so we're looking as a coalition even more about looking at implementation and practice on all of these critical issues. But I didn't go into the UNCAC yet because I think I'm taking a break now. Maybe Samantha wants to come in.
Yeah, so I think some of the, so the coalition itself, the UNCAC, the COSP meetings, I think from that, what we what we see is the big product, or what I think of as the big products, are the resolutions. So, I mean, what are, if you could, if this has been going on for 20 years, what are some of the flavors of resolutions? With, of course, I know our big one, the one that will be the favorite among this group, is the reporting persons or whistleblowing. But let's still paint a bigger picture, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the UNCAC, I think it's really important and really unique because it is the only legally binding universal anti-corruption instrument, and it's a convention, and it's very comprehensive in all of the different aspects of corruption that you need to try and tackle, and really not just, for example, there are 8 different chapters of the convention that are addressing different aspects of corruption, and there's 71 articles. And so each one of those articles is dealing with a particular challenge, an anti-corruption issue. And so, for example, there's a whole chapter on prevention, and that's basically looking at all the preventive measures to hinder corruption, both in the public and the private sector. You have other chapters on criminalization of acts of corruption, like bribery, that many of you, I think are all kind of seeing the impacts of bribery, embezzlement, those kinds of things. There's a whole chapter focused on that. There's international cooperation, right? Because corruption goes across borders. So there's a whole chapter on how countries should work together to try to tackle cross-border corruption. There's asset recovery to really try to recover the proceeds of corruption, and to really work for countries to work together to do that. And then, there's chapters on technical assistance, on information exchange, and there's also another part of the convention that's really important, and that's a review mechanism where it's a peer review mechanism where countries are actually reviewing whether their anti-corruption controls or frameworks and all their UNCAC requirements are actually being implemented and actually being effective. So that's a whole nother instrument right there that's part of the UNCAC, a very crucial part of it for promoting accountability. Now, at all of these conferences that happen every 2 years, they, as you said, Jackie, they adopt resolutions. That's one of the main outcomes of bringing in all these states parties together. And they really have, over the years, advanced or adopted resolutions on all various aspects of the UNCAC convention. So as I related on prevention, enforcement, criminalization, international cooperation, and asset recovery. Asset recovery, for example, one where you need a lot of cooperation among states. That's been a kind of a recurring resolution over the years. There have been a lot on prevention of corruption, because there's a whole chapter 2 on prevention, as I was saying. So there's been at very, CoSP, there's been very resolutions that are kind of introduced and follow-up resolutions on that issue of prevention. And then, I think most recently, what I'd like to really highlight is that there have been some more specific resolutions on key anti-corruption topics. And those are topics or issues, challenges that civil society and our coalition that have really identified as problems, as our civil society members are working at the national level, including GAP, who's our member, who identify all these challenges. And that relates to, for example, secrecy around beneficial ownership information. That relates to very much whistleblower protection issues related to Article 33 and how that's implemented. So it's very much related to this group. Other kinds of issues around civil society participation, gender impacts, and gender and corruption, and the interlinkages, human rights and corruption. And so we've had some dedicated resolutions on some of those issues. And that's really, I think, a very concrete outcome of the CoSP, is you can get a resolution that's adopted. To this time, it's by consensus. They've agreed by consensus. And we had in 2023, when the United States was hosting the CoSP, we had the protection for reporting resolution that was adopted through a lot of hard work through GAP and others, and now we have this working group as well focused on it. So I think that more and more, we're trying to advocate for resolutions that are on important topics that have meaningful commitments, as well as follow-up actions like technical assistance, capacity building, that really promote the participation of civil society, both in the commitments, but as well as in the follow-up measures. And so the reporting persons one is a very concrete example, and we've had many more. We can go more over that, but I think for this tonight, it's a very, obviously very relevant resolution for this group.
Mm-hmm. So let's turn to that resolution. Samantha, why don't you tell us a little bit about the resolution on reporting persons and some of the elements that it covers? And you're on mute.
Just to set the stage a little bit, we have the UNCAC, the treaty, right? And that has legal personality, but within the UNCAC is Article 33, which says that states essentially should have, right, some sort of, and they don't call it whistleblower law, but they want to protect people who report corruption from retaliation, and that's whistleblowers. So this is Article 33 is kind of where we, whistleblower rights advocates, where we live, and so it's not a binding required provision to establish legislation to protect whistleblowers from retaliation. And in fact, when we started doing this advocacy work, the member states, what is a whistleblower? And also, we hate this term, and also this doesn't translate well, and we're confused, and you need to just explain these principles to us, right? So it was hardly ever even being talked about. And now it's being talked about by almost everyone as a matter of routine in their speeches. They're all talking about a new whistleblower framework, program, bill that they're working on, achievements that they've made. It's almost automatic, and it's a deep sense of pride. And so we've really influenced international trends, and even this word whistleblower, though it may not translate well, is a term of art that is being used very widely now. And I think that seeing this level of international support just for the concept of whistleblowers mattering very much for corruption prevention and implementing the spirit of the UNCAC is really huge for us. But because Article 33 is kind of weak, one of the tools in our toolkit was to have a resolution. And a resolution, if not well drafted, is just word salad, right? Paying lip service to nice words, if you can even get these countries to agree to nice words, right? To principles, and there's nothing to it. But there are a few concrete things that a resolution can do. It can call for UNODC to provide technical assistance. It can provide for UNODC to do a study or report. It can call for presentation, a study on the topic to happen. For instance, we had in Resolution 10.8, UNODC do an international study of whistleblower rights and challenges and best practices in the UNCAC member states. 80 countries or so completed their evaluation, and now the responses to that are publicly available for everyone to see. And they presented a report at the intergovernmental special session of the Working Group on Prevention of Corruption in Vienna in June of 2025. So these are the things that were called for by the resolution. But because of UNODC's study, which is because of the resolution, the OECD did an almost twin study for G20 countries and invited other countries to participate too. And so they have 21 responses on very similar questions, and that is now publicly available. And through the coalition, we did one that has responses not from governments, but from civil society and legal experts around the world doing a parallel assessment of their country's whistleblower frameworks, best practices, challenges, and so on. So now we have this landscape, this mapping, we're identifying trends, problems, and so on, and we can do something with that. We hope that we can do something with that. But I don't want to undersell the importance of the principles that were in the resolution, because they were also hard fought for. And these are principles, agreed upon principles, that can be used in your advocacy. So if you're advocating for your country's whistleblower laws, you can use that to say you shouldn't just protect a whistleblower, you should protect people associated with them. You should protect their families. They should have secure, anonymous reporting channels that are inclusive, and it should be accessible, and they should protect people's psychosocial welfare, and have psychological and legal and financial assistance. And we really fought hard to make sure that there was some language that made it clear that a whistleblower's motives can't be put on trial, and their motives should be irrelevant for whether they should qualify for protection. And that was important because the word good faith, it's in the Article 33, it's in the UNCAC. The word good faith sounds nice because it's good and it's faith, and who doesn't like that? It sounds quite lovely. But the courts have been saying in some instances that good faith is essentially a motives test for whistleblowers. And what we really want to look at is, do they have a reasonable belief that they reported something is true? We don't care about their personal reasons or motives or likability or any of that stuff when it comes to whether or not you should qualify for protection. We want your evidence. We want to hear from you. So we addressed that. That was a big accomplishment for us as well. There are many other wonderful things in the whistleblower resolution. It's called Resolution 10.8 for short. So I encourage you to definitely check it out. But use it. You let people know about it. Look at the principles, use it in your advocacy when you're pushing for whistleblower legislation, and remind countries of their commitments to have whistleblower laws and what that's supposed to entail. It's supposed to have best practices, and we're citing also UNODC's best practices on whistleblower legislation, which outlines all of the best practices that we share as civil society whistleblower rights advocates, and the things that we feel that whistleblowers need to have for paper rights to have any chance at all of protecting someone, which I think there's many whistleblowers here today. You all know it's falling short, and we all have more work to do. So, the Americas, thanks to, I think, the culmination of all of this international pressure, is now starting to look at more whistleblower bills, more whistleblower amendments. But overall, there's a lack of strong, comprehensive whistleblower laws in the Americas. Canada's, I think, the world's worst whistleblower law still. The United States is now trailing behind the rest of the world in best practices. We used to, I think, enjoy that number one spot, and we no longer have it. So there's still work to be done here in the United States as well. And the resolution can be a framework for that. We can also get language in other resolutions on whistleblower protection and continue to reinforce those messages. And in fact, one thing, that we didn't get was anti-SLAPP. That's retaliatory lawsuits against whistleblowers. We didn't get strong language on that. It's hard to get. And it's something that we're going to continue to fight for. And we use this platform, the conferences of state parties costs, to ask for that, among other things, including protection for journalists who through their whistleblower sources make public interest disclosures, and whistleblowers can come under attack through their journalists, and the journalists can come under attack even for doing their work in similar ways that whistleblowers do, and they need protection as well. So this is another issue we really hope to highlight in future dedicated resolutions, is the need to protect journalists and their sources, and the people who defend them as well, and the publishing companies and so on.
Yeah, so I would agree. We're definitely living in a time where we're seeing the rights that especially some of us who are a little older have taken for granted, that like we've fought these battles and we've won them, and we have these rights and we have these protections. And I think there's that deep breath moment where you begin to realize that that's not always the case. And as whistleblowers, many of the people, and I'm going to start to open this up to questions and dialogue. So, and we ask you to raise your hand so I can just keep track of who's talking and who's next. You know, sometimes these can get a little, I don't want to say heated, dynamic, and then I lose the ball as to what we're doing. So if we could start to think about like some of the things we might want to discuss, my first question then would be, you know, so what's a small step? Like, what is something that everybody and anybody who wants to support these UN efforts, which seems so global and so massive, how do we bring that home? How do we make that make sense in our own communities or in our own work or even in our own case?
So, I mean, I think that this is something when you're engaging in dialogue with your government representatives, when you're working on legislation and advocating your positions, you can use these tools to advance your position. But you can create something that doesn't exist through this process, and the coalition exists to hold your hand through that process. There was no dedicated resolution on whistleblower protection, and it was the coalition that really held our hand through the process and taught us how to engage through written submissions and plenary speeches and panel submissions, and continuously raising these points, having how to contact members of different governments and engage with different regional representatives to have one-on-one dialogue about these principles and encourage governments to do more on whistleblower protection. So, it may seem overwhelming, but the important thing isn't to necessarily understand it all now, but understand that you are part of a community, and that community is here to support you. And you can join the working group, and you can join the coalition, and people will be there to hold your hand through the process. So you have an opportunity to be heard and to have an idea and try to get some international consensus to make that happen. And maybe that can trickle down, and we hope it will make a difference. That is always the hope.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. I think that the other thing, as Samantha said, the coalition, I think it's a great way, whether you join a specific working group, if you're interested on whistleblowers, or we have other groups on, for example, the victims of corruption. That's one of our other working groups, is another example. You get to meet other people, some we do have individual experts, but also civil society organizations, and you get to also learn about what they're doing on the issue, learn about the issues and approaches that they're taking in their country, or further down at the community level in some cases. And that can also be really important for giving you ideas on what you could do in your community or at your national your government. It also provides an opportunity to potentially do joint advocacy around specific, legislation or other types of initiatives in your in your country. And we have regional networks as well, so you can join up with other groups in your region to, again, make connections and possibly do joint work and just be support, sharing in solidarity, because we all know that these are really, really difficult issues as well. So I think that's another important aspect of it. I will also put in the chat here just more of a link to our general coalition, and you can get more information, like Samantha was saying, about how you can become a member as well, or at least what that offers.
Yeah, we have put some resources in the chat. So if you don't have your chat open, please take a look there as well. But I did see, Chuck, I don't know if you want to come on camera or unmute, but I saw you put in the chat a question that you were curious about what work is being done to perform to build community that helps overcome the whistleblower loneliness and isolation that erodes whistleblowers' ability to continue the important work. And, so that question's right up my alley. I think that's the reason we created Whistleblowers of America, was so that we could network with each other and break down the loneliness and the isolation. And I think, the US is a little unique in how big it is and how many time zones it covers. So sometimes that's a challenge. We do things sometimes during the day, we do things at night because we're trying to hit multiple time zones. But I think there's also this, that we could take these very global documents and perspectives and bring them to our own communities and our own councils. We, when we opened up here we're in Escambia County, Pensacola, Florida, we went to the town council and we got them to do a resolution to recognize July 30th is National Whistleblower Day. And so that, because they gave us the proclamation, it gave us an opportunity about talking about whistleblowers and whistleblower laws to our very, very local small town. But it gave us a forum and a voice. And if you're looking to connect more locally, just because we're talking about a very global coalition, that doesn't mean that you couldn't also bring this home to your own communities and network more locally than, just in the US or just in the state of Florida or whatever state you're in, that you can. I think, Chuck, you earlier mentioned you're up in Washington State. Being able to find other people who are interested in Washington State might mean having to go to like public forums and other places. I don't know if you want to join or if you had comment. I think I saw another hand go up. Oh, here's Chuck. We can. Are you trying to unmute? Let me see if I can unmute everybody.
Everybody's unmuted. Everybody can turn their camera on.
Okay, yeah, I see he's here. Chuck, can you hear us? Yeah, we can hear you though. I'm trying to see if I can unmute you. Paul, can you help him unmute?
No, he has to unmute himself. He should have the capability to do it. If he's having issues, maybe he can jump out and jump back in, but he should have the capability to just do it himself.
Okay. Well, I think I saw Joe Carson was on. Did I see your hand go up somewhere?
Yeah, hi,
Great.
Jackie. One of the, I'm involved with a number of NGOs that don't have whistleblower protection as a primary goal, but could, such as professional societies or faith communities. But being an engineer, I'll use the final mile analogy. Like if you're going to wire a city, a lot of the expense is doing the final mile, not all the bigger issues. So my final mile is just to find a few other people who belong to some of these organizations so we can work together. And I'm looking, at the people here, if we could create just like an Excel spreadsheet of what other organizations, faith communities, things that you belong to that, you found others you could try to advocate within them for whistleblower protection. So that's my thought. Thanks.
Joe, did you want to share? I know you recently mentioned the moral ambition group you were talking about starting. Do you want to maybe put something about that in the chat and see if there are people here who would join you for that?
Will do.
Or
Thanks.
You want to talk about that or Wild Goose Festival or some of these other things?
Yeah, I've got a number of fingers. So a best-selling book last year was called Moral Ambition. And whistleblowers have a lot of moral ambition and also a lot of moral courage. And so the author of the book has created an online, if you will, school for moral ambition, by which the people who join it can then propose what he calls circles, where with a given topic that others can, with a facilitator kind of leads to try to advance some, issue of common good, which there are many. So I've created a circle, Whistleblowers for a World That Works for All. And you know, Samantha, Tom has agreed to get involved if they'll accept it. But my issue, and we don't realize it, there's a cost to being a whistleblower. And the school of moral ambition is more, oh, this will just be people throwing rose petals in front of you. You're making things better, you know. And I'm saying, wait, we have to own up to there could be a cost to this, and so that's where we're kind of right now. Can they accept that what I'm proposing for whistleblowers? You know, some of them are going to be sticking their necks out, and there's going to be a risk, and there's going to be casualties. And I wish that we're wrong in saying that, but I have to accept reality, you know. And I'm trying to make the small school of moral ambition to say, oh, this might require moral courage, and kind of take it from there. I got to laugh or cry at some of this. But the Wild Goose Festival, I'll pat myself on the back, but to my knowledge, it's the first faith-based group that has really explicitly endorsed whistleblowing, and in part because of me. And Jackie, well, Tom was there last year trying to get some of the faith-based public policy groups to get more involved with whistleblower advocacy. And Jackie may be here this year. You know, a number of whistleblowers, I don't want to play holier now, but a number of whistleblowers will attribute their faith or their worldview to why they're sticking their necks out.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that the whistleblower community is kind of tone deaf to that, I think we're missing something. You know, everyone's reasons for sticking their necks out are better for them. I'm not going to say mine are absolutely better, but they're better for me. I like to see they're accepted as valid by others, just as I want to accept other people's reasons as valid for them. So the extent that faith-based communities don't get involved, one example, we're going through the opioid settlements with the Sacklers. You know, $1 billion, they don't go to jail. Well, where are the faith communities saying we're now filling all these, you know, recovery things with all these people that have been hurt by the opioids? Why should they get out of jail free? And they're not there. And they never have been there. You know, like tobacco is the same thing, and a number of other things. So it doesn't have to be that way. So the whistleblower community, you know, we could just in terms of why these faith communities, their own reasons for existing, saying, well, why aren't you showing up? You know, you have to create some cognitive dissonance. And to the extent that the people are in the whistleblower community that belong to these faith communities, they could be making the same message on the inside.
Yeah, I would love to see more of the faith-based community groups involved in the UN coalition and supporting some of these resolutions. And I think maybe that's something for Wild Goose this year, is to bring the resolutions to the people and ask them, like, you know, why don't the ordained communities have ways of endorsing these types of human rights activities or moral activities from a greater scale? So I don't disagree with you, Joe, at all. I think we just have to figure out the steps to get us from those places.
And you have to realize the resistance is frequently the color of money, and that these faith-based communities get a buck from the corporations and the foundations, and they don't want to bite the hand that feeds. That's, you know, in a sense, I look at it as like a modern day version of indulgences. Instead of, you know, paying money to the church to get out of purgatory, the corporations pay money to the church to buy their silence to their, you know, wayward ways. I'm going off on another tangent. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Joe. Always appreciate your thoughts on these kinds of topics and how we can weave together some of these networks that I think are important. You know, I have become very interested in working with the global community, to kind of go back to what Chuck was saying about breaking down the loneliness. And I mean, other than letting me speak in Doha, I think it is this knitting together again of civil societies and the law, but also I feel like we need to bring in other communities like the faith-based. And of course, I'm always looking for where are the mental health associations? I mean, where's the American Psychological Association or the National Association of Social Workers or the AMA? Where are these groups when it comes to endorsing resolutions or promoting resolutions or even writing about these resolutions? I know I don't know where I put it, but I know there's the UNCAC created a communications toolkit. Maybe, Dante Pressler, hey, good. I think maybe those are tools we can train on a little bit more, because I think, writing about this and incorporating this into the American consciousness, I think is so important. And I got excited. I saw Dante has joined. I don't know if you want to say hello. Dante and I have worked on a book chapter together.
Hi, sorry,
Yes.
it's late here in Mexico. Hi, Dr. Jackie. Nice to meet all of you. As Dr. Jackie was saying, we were working in a chapter of an article about exactly what you're talking about, that we were highlighting how report corruption is not only a legal or institutional challenge, but also a deeply human one that involves retaliation, isolation, and significant mental and emotional cost. So I was thinking about the question that what we can do, and I understand that Whistleblowers for America is focused on the United States, but at the same time, it's important to recognize that corruption is often transnational, especially in regions like Mexico and Latin America, where corruption can be closely linked to organized crime, drug trafficking, political power. So in many cases, these cases are interconnected across borders. So I think it will be helpful to approach whistleblower protection from a regional and cooperative perspective, and to look at existing frameworks such as Chapter 27 of the USMCA and also the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, because I think that with these instruments and their tools, we can use them to create pressure and incentives for governments to take real commitments, maybe not in this global vision or approach, but more in a regional approach. So that's my comment.
Thank you, and it's good to see you. We've done a lot of emailing, so and I appreciate it's late and that you're joining. But I also see Corinna wanted to come back in on the conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that this is really relevant to I think what the coalition is thinking about, as we begin a new year and figure out after a conference of states parties, how can we make these resolutions actionable? Like, how can we make them mean something, and really provide, use them as a tool, as you're saying, Jackie, to really try to advance progress in anti-corruption, in civil society participation, access to information, whistleblower protection. And I think that it's a great idea to really try to build more coalitions. We do have, I think we've been working over the past couple of years, for example, to kind of break the silos between the work on corruption and human rights, right? Because they're interlinked, and how corruption is impacting human rights. And so we're doing more and more work to try to work with human rights organizations. They're part of our network, and also try to work in human rights fora to make those connections between the UNCAC and the Human Rights Council. And Dante, you also mentioned other anti-corruption fora, regional fora, other initiatives, and we completely agree that we really need to be using all of these different conventions in a kind of a mutually reinforcing way, right? And civil society really to join forces to try to use all of these agreements and really make sure that they are actually meaningful in practice. And I think that's what these resolutions really do. We have, if we can use them, and that's something we still want to kind of work on more. And so, Jackie, one thing that we have this civil society toolkit, which you want to continue to use, and then think about having toolkits that could be used on the specific resolution, really that you kind of use hand in hand with the resolution. So civil society organizations, whether they're human rights or focus on whistleblowers, other issues, can go to their governments and say, we want you to implement this resolution, in a very kind of concrete way. This is what we would like you to do. Civil society needs to be part of that process, engaged, contributing. And it can be not just at the national level, but, you know, as at the community level or at the state level, you know, however it works best, where you're coming from. So I think we would really welcome, whether it's part of the working groups, to try to bring in new groups in, or new areas of focus groups that focus on other areas of mental health or other issues, faith-based. I think that we would really welcome that. And I'll just to say, it can also be through, we have an Latin American Caribbean regional network. So that's another a way to really work with others in the region, to try to and bring in new groups to try to work collectively to advance these issues.
No, I appreciate that. I see Nick has his hand up as well.
Yeah, everyone. Just as we think through these reforms and potential reforms, have there been quantitative studies that show the benefits of whistleblowing? Like, say, for example, in a business context where I am, have there been analyses done that show, hey, you know, whistleblowing is good for innovation because it's good for innovation, or it's good for, you know, let's say it's a government organization. It's good for that government organization to try to get a tailwind behind, you know, speaking truth to power. It's not speaking truth to power, but it's speaking truth to effectiveness of, you know, of our country. Has anyone, do we have those types of resources?
So I love that question. So the data and the collecting the data is definitely something, you know, I know at Whistleblowers America, we've tried to do some surveys and we've looked at, but I think, Samantha, I don't know if you wanted to answer that question or you had another comment, but I think we can, you know, let's figure out how to weave these things together.
Yeah, so there's really not as much data as I would like on whistleblowers' impact. However, there have been consistently studies showing the impact that whistleblowers have on the private sector, in particular, in terms of identifying fraud, and being, I think, 4 times more effective than having, you know, hotlines and other systems combined, audits, et cetera, for detecting fraud, and saving companies money through, you know, saving their reputation and preventing reputational damages and legal damages from discovering the fraud or the misconduct later. And so there has been, to some extent, a focus on that on a kind of global scale. But what I would really love to have is actually, you know, what, you know, and it's not really aggregated very clearly, but how much money do whistleblowers save taxpayers? Like, do we actually reduce poverty, and how can we even measure the impact of whistleblowers on corruption and preventing it or stopping it? It's not so easy to do, but we know it's there. We know that it's important, and there's plenty of case studies and anecdotal, you know, information here or there. But I think the more we can build up statistics and evidence to support all of the many different types of ways that whistleblowers benefit all of society, and their direct impact on corruption, having that is something we could really use. I think we could, you know, make more of an impact if there was a way to measure that. I don't know, you know, how to go about making that happening. I'm definitely interested in seeing it happen. So if folks have ideas, I'm really interested, I'll drop my email in the chat, and I hope you'll get in touch.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I put the Department of Justice every year puts out how many reward cases it adjudicated and how much money it recovers from settlements. And I think we're at like $68 billion. But that's just one slice of the whistleblowing pie, so to speak. You know, that you know, and I know there have been cases like over contaminated water. That's not in the Department of Justice. And so we have, you know, we have input measures, output measures, and outcome measures. This is an output measure because it's dollars, but an outcome measure would be not just about the tax dollars, but some of these other issues like if water is being contaminated in Flint, Michigan, and we have a whistleblower who reports this unsafe water, how many people were exposed to drinking the water? How many people were saved from drinking contaminated water? How many people got sick? How many people stopped getting sick? You know, there are some of these more, and these are more longitudinal type studies. But I think we, this might be any of my interns on tonight. This might actually be a study, maybe something we can partner with GAP on over reviewing whistleblower settlements, you know, the cases. And that might be worth a look. Like, so what did whistleblowers prevent? And maybe pull together some data on that. I would be up for looking at something like that.
Yeah, and Jackie, I mean, if you're willing to bring on a whistleblower to help with that type of work, you know, if you form a committee, I certainly would like to help, because my uncle, who I adore, who's really smart and very successful in business, he says, you gotta get people behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to have a reason, like you have to, you know, because there's so many forces that are against you. Just naturally, you have to sell the benefits of what you're doing. And it really stuck with me.
I don't disagree. And I think, you know, Corinna was talking about the review mechanism for the for how our country is implementing the resolutions. I mean, I think that this sort of is like an added asterisk to that. So they're implementing the resolutions. They're saying they did. How successful are they at achieving success, if that makes sense? I see Bali has a hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody on the call is doing work on regulatory capture, because what I see in California is not that there aren't laws. There are great laws on paper in California, but there are certain industries where corruption has become the norm in that industry. Like, everybody's violating labor laws, everybody's violating Department of Homeland Security regulations. And so a law-abiding business is at a competitive disadvantage. And if you're an individual whistleblower, you can't get an attorney unless it's a big class action lawsuit. So you're stuck filing with state and federal agencies, which either due to understaffing, incompetence, or maybe collusion with the businesses, they're not doing effective investigations. So what you'll see in some industries is if an individual business has been sued, they might actually be following some of the state laws or federal laws. But if they haven't been sued, they're basically doing whatever they want, because the odds of getting caught are so low that, you know, they'll just keep going until they get, you know, a citation, then they pay the citation, they go right back to doing whatever they were doing, because anybody can get through an accreditation inspection or at some other kind of inspection that's like once every 3 years or once a year. So to me, that's the biggest problem I have seen, you know, in California, because we have great whistleblower protections on paper, but they're not working. So if anybody knows of, if anybody's like collecting documentation of that we've had state auditors reports, so the state auditors are aware of some of the problems, but maybe not the full extent of the problem. And I do think that's a big problem with corruption, is when the regulatory agencies are not functioning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a great point, Samantha.
And not to just pile on, but I'm just going to kind of give that a big +1, because, when you have these settlements, when you have accountability, oftentimes it doesn't look like firing everyone, and starting all over, right? Like they don't clean house and wipe out all of the corrupt people. And it's not just like the people who did the corrupt acts who should be like individually accountable, but the people who enabled it, and participated in it, or should have stopped it, right? And didn't. So they're also part of the problem, and it becomes cultural in a way that it's really hard to imagine a world in which, when there is some form of accountability, that is going to stop them from just continuing to do the same thing, because it's just the cost of doing business when you get slapped. That's why you see, Boeing, right, continuing bad behavior and so on. These settlements may seem like a ton of money to the enforcement agency, but it's really not to the company. It's not enough to prevent, and it's not enough to deter. So corruption, it is, deeply rooted, and it's systemic, and it's really hard to stop. And we can't, just focus, of course, on the whistleblower lens, but all of the institutions, the entire framework that is a part of their life. Who do they report to? What do those people do with the information? What is the enforcement? What is the accountability? What is the follow through on that? Because without all of that in place, it's pretty meaningless. So yeah, whistleblower laws right now, like in and of themselves, they just don't work. It's not, California's got some good state laws. Well, all the states have some form of whistleblower law. Some of our federal laws are actually pretty decent on paper, but pretty much applicable in all countries everywhere. In practice, it's just not enough. But I don't want to be too defeatist, and I think that does go back to measuring impact and also measuring success, defining success. What does success look like to us? And maybe these are also smaller things that happen in smaller increments, or maybe it's even bigger than we realize. So if we can find a way to define and measure that, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of our other efforts, as some of you know, is the Be a Giraffe, because I think one of the ways we address this monster that is corruption is through educating youth. And I know the UNODC has this GRACE project, another wonderful little toolkit that I do have sitting on my desk, to look at how we engage young people in anti-corruption measures. So I think that's another aspect, and something we'll talk about at our next roundtable. So I'll come back to that in a second, but I see Corinna has had her hand up and waiting. So I'm gonna let you have a last word. And I'm also gonna acknowledge, I see things in the chat. We can, if you don't wanna, I appreciate that not everybody always wants to come on camera. I am paying attention to what you're saying in the chat, and we can follow up on some of these issues. But Corinna, last word for tonight, and then I'll set a reminder for next time.
Okay, yeah, well, this was really interesting for me. I think just following on Samantha's point, and you mentioned, Jackie, this is a little bit, we've got a little bit of time here, but I think as much as organizations, whistleblowers, can gather this information about the challenges with the implementation, the lack of implementation or enforcement, other kind of challenges that mean that even if you have good laws on the books, they're not actually, achieving their intended purpose. And I just would flag that at the conference in Doha, one of the, I think, hopeful things is that the review mechanism for the UNCAC was renewed, and there are some improvements there, and including for more civil society participation, and to actually look at UNCAC provisions in the implementation in practice, and to really look at whether the laws, related to UNCAC, the UNCAC and the implementation are actually achieving their purpose, are having impact or having the desired kind of results. And so the United States is a member of the UNCAC, and so all of the states that are part of the UNCAC, they will come up for review, and civil society should have more of a voice and an opportunity to raise all of these challenges with implementation of laws, including whistleblower laws. And we, as the coalition, are, I think, going to be developing materials and other information to make it as easy as possible for groups to really participate in these reviews and influence them. So that might be another opportunity to really shine light on these kind of challenges. So I just thought I would end with that, and just really quickly that we will be coming up with an analysis on the resolutions at the CoSP. And so hopefully with that, you can see where whistleblower protection and other issues, how they were addressed, and how you could, go to your governments or, go to other stakeholders and try to raise awareness about these issues as well. But thank you so much for having me. And please, I'll put my email in the chat too, if you'd like to reach out directly.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody participating tonight. I've seen the emails that you're all sharing in the chat. And part of why we do this is we kind of pick a topic we know people care about, and then it's an opportunity to network and connect with each other, without needing me to be in the middle of brokering all of that. You guys are great at helping each other out, and we're just the forum for you to be able to do that. So please do continue to connect with each other and to communicate with each other. Look for the toolkit that's out there, the Stratcom, or the communications, the social media, and some of these toolkits, because if you are doing any kind of writing or speaking, there's some really good talking points in there that I think could be really helpful for you to promote some of your own work or some of your own ideas and some of your own nonprofits. And then for next month, February 24th, so mark your calendars, will be our next roundtable. And we will be having a session on whistleblowing within the schools, but we're going to have some parents and maybe some students join us. I know Kim Williams, I think I saw you on here somewhere, is going to be one of our panelists next month. And Whistleblowers of America, we, at one point, I was a little apprehensive to go down this road because we try to stay very much focused on employment-related whistleblowing, but we found that there was some crossover with some of the students' internships, your education, what it does to your career and your future gainful employment. So we've decided to do a little work in this area, and so the toolkit should be out next month, and then we'll have the roundtable next month with parents and students talking about whistleblowing in school. And I hope you'll come back and join us then. And in the meantime, please stay connected with all of us. Happy New Year. And thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Samantha, Corinna, for joining us, and stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And thanks to all of you.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
everybody.
Thank you. Great to see you all.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone. Have a great night.
You too. Enjoy dinner.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks so much.